Are you kidding me, lady? Please!
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 horror slasher film, Sick. The film is directed by John Hyams and it stars Gideon Adlon. We have Bethlehem Million, we have Dylan Sprayberry, Joel Courtney, Jane Addams and Mark Menchacarda. Right. The film is essentially set in April 2020, right at the start of the COVID outbreak, when there was so much uncertainty, lack of knowledge and fear. America's in pretty much lockdown, there's very few supplies, everybody's a little bit scared about what's going on and nobody really understands. And we meet Parker and her friend Miri. Now, Parker and Miri are heading off to Parker's like family residence, which is like out in the hills somewhere. It's miles away from anybody, and they're going to basically quarantine together through COVID. Just these two of them, her and a friend. When they get there to this lavish site, they're having a really good time, and then they start getting some strange texts from someone who can clearly see what they're doing, which frightens them. Parker's boyfriend of sorts turns up, DJ, and then they realise that they are actually not alone and there is a real credible threat to their lives that is linked to the COVID outbreak. Right, what are my thoughts on Sick? Well, this one on the surface, and it did to me until I looked into it a little bit more, just looks like a fairly run-of-the-mill standard slasher film. And then there's a few things added to this one that might interest you. It's written by Kevin Williamson, who wrote the first 2 or 3 Scream films. He was the toast of Hollywood in regards to writers, certainly for horror films in the 90s after he wrote Scream. And it's directed by John Hyams, who is the son of Peter Hyams, the legendary, in my opinion anyway, really legendary director Peter Hyams, who's directed films like End of Days, Running Scared, The Relic. He's done loads of films over the years, Peter Hyams. So this film has a certain amount of pedigree to it. And I have to say, after watching this film, guys, I was really quite impressed with what I saw. Because initially, when I was kind of contemplating whether to watch this or not, I'm a bit like, do I really want to watch another COVID film? I have watched more films than I probably care to count over the last 2.5, 3 years that I have reviewed on this channel that have been COVID related. Most of them are cheap B-movie zombie type things that they try and connect to like outbreaks and pandemics, and it's the toast of the town in regards to movies, doing movies on pandemics these days or COVID related films. Very few of films that I have watched over the last 2 or 3 years that have had COVID or have acknowledged the COVID virus have been what I would call impressive or watchable. There's been a handful. There's been things like Host, which was like filmed during lockdown, and there were people on the Zoom call and things like that I thought was excellent. And I think this was really, really good because it felt like a relevant horror film that was directly connected and linked to the COVID outbreak. And what I mean by that as well is, they're doing the quarantine alone. Everyone's wearing masks. That real sense of fear that we all had in 2020 when nobody really understood what was going on in regards to COVID and things. And it does capture that, I think, pretty good. It's got a strong opening, this film, because we meet another character beginning of this film who gets teased by text by this killer again. And he kind of becomes the first victim sort of thing. Now, I didn't realise when I watched this at the start that this was written by Kevin Williamson, because my main thought patterns when I was watching this is it feels like a Scream remake to a large degree. It is very, very similar to Scream in more ways than one, but in a sense of the killer, there's a few ways. There's a couple I can't talk about because it'll give spoilers away, but the two I can talk about that I think are very similar to Scream is the killer communicates with the victims through a telephone. It doesn't ring them and talk about horror movies. It kind of teases them over texts, sort of thing. And another way as well is that the killer basically takes a battering, very much in this, like in the Scream films. You're not like they're not like unstoppable machines like Michael Myers and Jason and things in the Scream films. You can hurt them because they're just normal people, and that was proven in the Scream movies. Well, it's proven again here. You know what I mean? They fight back, and the killer gets hurt. So I think it's very similar to Scream in many ways, but there's nothing wrong with that if it's done well. And I think this film is done well. I think it's well made. I think the performances are good. Early on, I wasn't keen on the characters, but they kind of warmed up to me. But you don't really have an awful lot of time to think, because once this film cracks into third gear sort of thing, it doesn't slow down. It's straight into fourth gear, fifth gear, and it's off. And it's kind of fast-paced and intense thriller stroke horror stuff going on, and the kills are really quite brutal at times as well, some of the kills that you see in this film. And you really do, it is edge of the seat stuff at points in this film, and I think it's done really well. I think this is one of the best kind of Scream clones that I have seen over the years. And Scream again is popular again because of the Scream film that came out last year, was it? And the new one that's coming out this year, I believe. So Scream is popular again, and this film, I think, is a really good version of a Scream film, but it's tied in brilliantly to the COVID outbreak, and it's the first COVID outbreak film I've seen that feels relevant, in a sense of it's part of the story and it makes sense. When the reveal takes place later in the film, again, it makes sense why everything is happening. It's a simple story and everything ties in. There's not these silly, overly convoluted plots that leave you kind of scratching your head or frustrated. It's a simple plot and it all makes sense by the end. And the stuff in the middle is intense, fast-paced, some brutal kills. And if you like slasher films, I think you'll be quite impressed with this one. I don't think it's going to be everybody's cup of tea, and there will be some that watch this and just think, it's just ripping off Scream. But the guy that wrote this wrote Scream, so you can kind of forgive him, I suppose. He can kind of write his own Scream clones, if you like. It's he wrote the original, so it's all good, I suppose. But I was far more impressed with this film than I expected to be, and it's actually a film I would consider putting in my collection if I got the opportunity, if it's released on Blu-ray. I thought it was that good. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you enjoyed checking it out. I'll be back with loads more reviews and content on the channel very soon.